Okay, so we're back. The next session is going to be on building a resilient technology in the supply chain of the future. We know some of the challenges that we've been having with the current state of the supply chain and the global chip shortage and et cetera. And we just recently heard on a panel from Isauda. Isauda is from Intel Corporation. So who better than to be the moderator for this panel than Isauda herself? So I would like for you to provide a warm, high-tech welcome for Isauda. Put your hands together. Fuerte aplauso para Isauda. Thank you.
Welcome back from break, everybody. Hope you had a nice little time. I'm looking forward to this talk because I love to keep learning. I'm a lifelong learner. And so a chance to build my business acumen from some of our top experts in supply chain is going to be a wonderful opportunity for me to learn and hopefully for you as well. As we go along, if you have any questions, please save those. We'll be having time at the end so you can ask your questions as well. So as Rick mentioned, we all experienced and read about the supply chain issues during COVID, starting from the inability to get masks, the shortages of chips to go into cars, shortages of gasoline. It's affecting everything, and all the logistics involved in that regarding shutdowns, like the shutdowns in Shanghai, creating a bottleneck globally. So in an interconnected world, supply chain is critical to get us all the goods and services that we need in the right places at the right time. So today we want to explore from 3 industry experts in supply chain and understand some of the lessons learned during this last 2.5-year time frame and understand some of the resilience that's been built in so that hopefully we won't experience these type of shortages in the future. So first up, what I'd like to do is introduce our first panelists. And when I introduce you, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about yourself and also to explain what your company learned about the supply chain and some of the steps that you put in place over the last couple of years. So first up, I'd like David Ashley, Senior Vice President, Product Operations from Cisco Systems. Welcome first, David. And
welcome.
First introduce yourself and then tell us a little bit about your supply chain experience over the last couple of years.
Okay. So first, thank you everyone for the opportunity to talk about Cisco and what we did during the supply chain crisis that we're still living through. A little bit about myself. I've been in the industry for quite a while. I started my career as a development engineer and then moved my way into supply chain about 7-8 years into my career. Been in the supply chain for that time period. Spent the last 20 plus years at Cisco Systems. And every day have the ability to learn something new, just like you heard a second ago. It's what excites me every day. So let me talk a little bit about Cisco supply chain and what we learned during this crisis. And this was a crisis and continues to be a crisis. What we saw in the world is a supply and demand disconnect. We're not in equilibrium. In a supply chain, what you want to do is you want to manage your supply with your demand. When COVID hit us, many companies, and specifically Cisco, expected the demand to decrease over that period of time. And we saw the complete opposite. We saw an explosion of the need specifically for Cisco's products and its networking gear through the world as the world was shifting to a more connected world and what we needed. So what was our challenge? Our challenge right in the beginning was to make sure that the supply we had went to the most important needs around the world. And that was healthcare, education, and government, so we can do our part to serve our community. But what we also did is we also communicated that to the rest of our customers and why and the importance we were doing that. And they were so supportive in that. So a great example is what we did with hospitals. People were going into the hospital early in COVID and their family could not visit them. And these can be little children, the elder in our community, anyone. And we were able to get video into many of those hospitals around the world so they connect to their families, et cetera. You saw what's going on with telemedicine and all the networking needed to do that. So that's what we focused on. Lessons we learned was more about how we have to continue to prioritize what our customers need in their network build and the importance of that network build versus just taking an order and satisfying it. Because what we had to do is we had to look at the needs of the community, our customers, and who they serve versus just first in, first out. So that was a change of our systems we have done. We have a lot, our customers trust us a lot. We're proud of our quality. We're proud of our innovation, but we did have to learn a lot through that. And we were incredibly proud when we were recognized by Gartner as one of the top supply chain for 3 years in a running, even through that difficult year. So that's kind of the lessons we learned. Customer first, focus on their needs, and prioritize that. And I hope to see over the next few quarters, I'm starting to see this thing open up a little bit, supply being more readily available, and I see that continuing if there's no additional world crises. And for my colleagues on this, as we all know, they seem to be coming fast and furious at us over the last few years.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, David. Mike Riley is Vice President of Information Technology at Johnson & Johnson, Supply Chain, Delivery Technology, and Customer Experience. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, Mike, and also what you experienced during this last 2.5 years?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. So I've been with Johnson & Johnson about 20 years. All my career has been in technology, supporting a lot of our commercial business around digital innovation, but also last 5 years in supply chain. For me, this crisis has been a lot different for Johnson & Johnson. Obviously, the 3 pillars of Johnson & Johnson, medical devices, pharmaceuticals, and consumer products, very different, very diverse. But also the responsibility of our credo to service patient care, especially around COVID. Developing a vaccine for COVID, getting that vaccine out globally, facing some of the challenges of not just supply chain, but the distribution of that, really was a challenge that Johnson & Johnson took tremendous pride in pushing forward. I mean, for us, you learned about the fragility of supply chain, the importance of really lining up continuity plans around the vendors as well as the supply that you're distributing. I think one of the most important things, as David talked about, was really focusing on your customer, or for us, the patient, and the patient care. And the patient care was very different from somebody who was going in for, say, a COVID vaccine versus a lot of our medical device business actually got pushed out because of surgeries that were deferred due to the COVID protocols and COVID safety. So we had to make adjustments in each of those, while our consumer business, based on all the people getting sick with COVID, high demands for some of our over-the-counter consumer products like Motrin, Tylenol, and others. So we had to react to that as well. So the ability to have access to your supply chain, visibility to the supply process and product availability really was essential for us. And for us, doubling down on our digital capabilities, doubling down on our analytics and our data science to be predictive around where our needs were going to be to fulfill the demand was essential. So I think it's made us stronger. And one of the biggest challenges in my area was around the customer experience. The demands for e-commerce and the demand for products online really drove tremendous growth in our business as well. And it was a change in how we went to market. So a lot of opportunities to grow and benefit coming out of COVID, but certainly something that we're continuing to process and continuing to improve the resiliency of our supply chain.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. And I think we're hearing the common theme about the focus on customer that really became crystal clear during this time. Next up, Tony Romero, who happens to be one of my colleagues at Intel, Vice President of Manufacturing Supply Chain and Ops. And I think we hear a lot about the chip shortage in semiconductors being a critical component. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Tony, and then a little bit about what Intel learned during this last 2.5 years.
Absolutely. Thank you. And great to be here with my partners in various industries. So as Asada mentioned, Tony Romero, I run part of Intel's supply chain, do factory planning, our logistics, decision support for manufacturing, the global network of manufacturing. I started 30 years ago or so in manufacturing itself, working on the front end for semiconductors. Moved to the back end after 6 or 7 years or so, and then into supply chain, more the centralized supply chain groups where I've been for the last 20 years or so. And I think very similarly, we, from the tariffs, which started several years ago, to the pandemic and the war, the conflict that we see in Russia, Ukraine, there's just been an unending level of disruption, I think, in our supply chains. And I think in similar situations, and everybody, I think, understands what's happening in semiconductors, we saw disruption on the supply front, on the component front, and, it's really challenged our systems and capabilities in terms of, do we understand the supply that our component suppliers have? Do we have sufficient supply? Do we have sufficient diversification geographically? And then demand was significantly different. I think very similar to Cisco, we saw work from home and learn from home explode globally. And so while we're being constrained from a supply and component supply standpoint, while we were being restricted from a people standpoint in our manufacturing operations, but also, with our suppliers, we're seeing demand, accelerate significantly to levels we hadn't ever seen before. And putting all that and working all that together, I think is really been the challenge, like these other two companies, for the last several years. And I think we've learned a lot. I mean, we have been preparing for a disruption for as long as I've been in the company and longer, and probably very similarly. So it's about the preparation, the drilling, the understanding of our supplier base and what their capabilities are, where their vulnerabilities are. Do they have the same kind of rigor around business continuity that we have? What can we learn from each other? And so that's been an important part. Those relationships have been really important with our supplier base, with government entities, with our customers. You've talked about that too, and so all those things have helped us. I think we've learned with the amount of disruption we've seen that we needed to be even more geographically dispersed. We needed to make sure that we really understood what was most strategically important from a supply perspective or supply capability across our supplier base or our internal manufacturing base. So I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but that's been one big thrust for us at Intel. And as we think about how we, the automobile sector is one, Isato, you talked about, medical devices, networking, personal computers, all these servers and what have you, that there's just a clamor for more semiconductor supply. And I think we've been, full on trying to get more of that supply out there, and it is getting a little bit better, it feels like. But I think one of the things we've learned, and you hear our CEO talk about, is we need to increase the geographical dispersion of semiconductor capacity globally, and specifically more in the West. And we'll probably talk about that a little bit, but that's been one of the critical areas of need for us. It's not just the leading node semiconductor capacity. It's stuff that may be 15 or 20 years old in terms of technology that is, putting industries, to a halt because we don't have enough. So lots to talk about, I'm sure.
So we heard a lot of different thoughts shared here, the diversifying of geographies and partnerships and, having to support long-range products. Let's dig in a little bit deeper, and I'm going to come back to you, David. We talk a little bit about partnerships and the importance of partnerships, and these could be public-private partnerships, partnerships with other peers, partnerships with people that maybe you didn't expect that would form partnerships as a result of some of the experiences we've had in the last 2.5 years. Can you talk a little bit about, for your company, some of the partnerships and how that helped you to deal with some of the supply chain issues? Oh, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry, I look at partnerships from two ways. We talked a little bit earlier about the partnership we have and we actually deepened with our customers. We talked about that, the importance of that, the importance of understanding the visibility to what they need in a network build so we can predict better. Because as we had to extend our lead times because we lost predictability in the supply chain from our components, we had to build that partnership. But what I'm going to focus more on is the partnerships of our supply base, and what we had to do there, because many of us over the years worked towards a very, call it just-in-time supply chain, where we knew what our lead times were. We call it either lead time or time to replenish or CT2R, whatever we call it in our system. Say it was 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks for ASICs, 18 weeks or 20 weeks. And we then would predict what our demand was, or we used our backlog or our customers' forecast, and we'd be relatively right every time. What started to happen during this time is our predictability, our visibility started to get worse over time, which means our suppliers started to miscommit or had to recommit their supply out because they had a disruption in the supply chain. And you saw that cascading effect. And when that happened, we, as the customer there, put more pressure to get our devices when we need it so we can make things. And so we lost that visibility, that predictability. One thing we try to do at Cisco's supply chain is enable the business. And we do that through two things. One, scale. So we have to introduce a scale production and be predictable. And we were losing both of those, that magic formula I call it. We couldn't scale at the rate we said we could, and we couldn't be predictable. So we had to go back to our supply base and start to distinguish who was doing well and had the capability to meet our needs and who was struggling. And if they were struggling, how can we help? Can we give them more visibility? Can we make an investment so they can buy additional capital? Can we give a longer term agreement so they had capital and cash to buy more inventory? So we looked for ideas and solutions that we didn't normally would do or haven't had to do previously. And so we built that. Now, as we're coming out of that, we have to decide with our supply base who supported us through that activity, who was a great partner, who had the capability to grow with us, and who struggled. And did they struggle because of decisions they made as a company to either deprioritize what we were doing, importance of other markets, or they just had similar struggles we had. And so we're going to go through that body of work over the next few weeks and months. And we're going to decide, do we increase our level of engagement with certain suppliers, which we will absolutely do? Do we want to disengage with certain suppliers because they're not necessarily have the same capabilities we need going forward? And then within our design work and our technology, we also have to, and this is a key element, work with a set of suppliers that bring innovative solutions to us every day so we can continue our competitive advantage in the marketplace. So we have to decide, in some areas we'll increase our supply base because we want more resiliency and more diversity. And in some cases we'll constrict it and contract it because we want to rely on one or two critical partners per technology. But that's how we're thinking about it as we go through that process.
I really like that. So really understanding each of the partners that you work with and understanding their strengths and weaknesses and adjusting based on what they needed to help you with what you needed. So
yeah, just one size doesn't fit all, right? And that's one of the lessons learned, right? We really have to see where the advantages and disadvantages are.
So Mike, same question for Johnson & Johnson. Partnerships. Tell us a little bit about what you've learned in the last couple of years on partnerships.
Yeah, I think it's similar to what David's talking about here, and understanding the level of trust and partnerships, the level of commitment to deliver against the demand. I think one of the biggest things that I would add to his comments is getting analytics and getting visibility for planning. So important as you go through a crisis like this to have insights into where your products are in that pipeline and having visibility into where your partnerships have products as well. I think when we talk about these large global supply chains, where you define local depends on where you are in the world, right? So we're all going to have a very diverse global supply chain and pipeline for our demand. However, I think it's, what are we doing around resiliency? And much of that is getting visibility, improving our analytics capabilities, what we're looking at. So we're really able to be more precise in our planning, precise in where we're going to be able to deliver on time in full against our orders. So those are things that I would think they're similar, but I think the analytics is certainly an area where we're focusing additional emphasis right now.
Excellent, thank you. Tony, what about Intel? Tell us a little bit about partnerships there.
supplier partnerships. I couldn't agree more with the comments just made. I would add maybe a couple of different areas. One that I think we've been investing for some time is in critical lanes, critical areas of transportation, or with government entities where we know we have a lot of product we have to move. We've been working on building, I'd call them trusted advisor relationships. Here's how, with consortiums in industry, but also with government entities. Hey, here's how we can work with you and how industry companies need to work with you to move product more efficiently and effectively. And over time, I think we've built those relationships so that when the situation like the Shanghai lockdown happened, or various restrictions were placed, we could go to the government and say, look, this is what we need. This is what companies need to be able to continue to move product, in these various regions. Help us, help you, help us keep, industry moving. And I think that's one investment that we've made, and it's probably been a 8-year investment, locally, but also, with the state government, that I think has really paid off for us. And, everybody should think about where are you moving your product, and do you really have, strong relationships? And then the other piece I would say with the customers is similar to some of the other conversation. What are the most critical products that you have that you need from us? And what are those other products, semiconductors in particular, that you need from other players? And where are we getting that? And how can we help each other? And how, it's that rolling up your sleeves and engaging those conversations to say, as David said, what is most critical for your business to sustain itself, to be productive, to hit the most critical needs for your customers? How can we help you? Where are those problems? How can we work together? And I think that's been another critical learning. It took us a little bit of time to get going, but it's a place where we saw a lot of benefit, and hopefully our customers did as well.
Great, all great examples of partnership and the importance of having those kind of conversations with peers, with governments, with all the stakeholders to give that, I think the way David described it, it's not one size fits all, having to kind of customize that with each partner you're talking to. Let me move to another question. About 15, 20 years ago, the big move was for offshoring, right? There was a look at how do I make my supply chain and my product more efficiently? And so a big push to perhaps do a lot of processing, development, manufacturing overseas. And I think what we learned during the pandemic is if you have only one source, you could be in trouble, right? So let me start with you, Tony. So with regard to the offshoring agenda from a decade or two ago, how have you seen that shift more recently?
I think this is one of the key lessons learned that we probably all faced in the pandemic, which is we were very regionally reliant on certain supply, and that supply affects everything that's happening globally. And I'm speaking specifically to semiconductors. And so we do regular assessments for do we have redundancy? Do we have sufficient inventory and supply? And obviously we didn't expect this level of disruption in our supply chains. One of the things we've learned, and again, you hear it from our CEO, we're investing big, and we think we're trying to get Western governments to realize that we need to invest much more heavily in semiconductors in the Western Hemisphere. And it doesn't take away from the what's going on in Asia, but we need to increase the capabilities here in the United States and also in Europe with additional investment in semiconductors and fabrication facilities. So we're making very public and big announcements. There's a $20 billion investment that we're making in Ohio now. There's another roughly $20 billion in Germany, along with some other research and development and other facilities in Europe. And I think that's something that if we step back and think about where we are with semiconductor supply, 2 decades, 3 decades ago, 80% of that supply was maybe in the West, 20% was in Asia, and that is flipped entirely. So now 80% of the supply comes from Asia. And again, we think we need to see that supply much more dispersed across the globe so that we can service, needs that are happening, and we can minimize the disruption that happens from things like the pandemic. So that's probably where our biggest thrust is right now.
Okay, thank you. Mike, same question. Have you observed a shift from this old thinking of, offshoring as much as possible for cost savings to something different? And maybe you could share that perspective.
Yeah, I think being in a regulated environment, there's a lot of controls in place to think in terms of where you're getting your supplies from and managing that. If you look back, like we were just talking about, and Tony was saying, it was a cost play historically, but right now you're looking at a very different model. You're looking at continuity. You're looking at continuity to provide capabilities and services to your customers. So you're seeing a more diverse regional perspective, so that those regions are not as dependent globally for some of their core products that may serve that local region. But we are so dependent. We've shifted so much that you're seeing a more of a balance now coming out of COVID. I think that's one of the lessons that we are learning across the industry. I expect that to continue as we move forward as well.
Thank you, Mike. David, your observations on the shift from offshoring mindset?
Yeah. Thank you for that, and great insight from the two of you. I appreciate that. How we have looked at this over the last few years is not necessarily offshoring from the United States or North America, but how we have a global footprint. As we all know, before COVID hit, we had a significant situation with tariffs, with the federal government setting up a certain tariffs on China. And when you're in the high-tech business, many of your components and or your manufacturing is in that region of the world. So we have been thinking through that prior to COVID. And one of the things that's most important to us is the resiliency of where we set up our facilities. We are a company that outsources its production to a set of partners around the world. We have a lot of tight controls, tight quality management, but we don't necessarily own that brick and mortar, some of the capital we own. And so we wanted to make sure that we have a set of partners that have a global network. And what we've been working from a design standpoint and manufacturing supply standpoint is how can we move quickly from region A to region B, either because customer demand shifted and or another world crisis happened, whether it was tariffs, whether it was a transit strike in some part of the world, or logistics costs were going up. So that's what we've been working for the last few years. And when COVID hit, that provided both an acceleration to that strategy and showed us that it works very, very well. So where it used to take us months, many months to shift production from A to B, when we introduce something new now with a new platform, we make sure we have a primary and an alternative site ready to go at any given time. And that served us well. And we will either divert, do an 80-20, 50-50, shift from A to B, depending on what's going on. So we've been thinking through that, but we had to do that work even before COVID because of some of the other situations we have. And we need to continue doing that. And that's all working with our design community to make sure we have a design that's more platform and more built off of the platform, so we can shift that pretty quickly.
Thank you. For my next question, I think you've all sort of hinted at risk and planning and such. And so probably your answer is going to be yes, but I want to go a little bit deeper. So do you think it's important for a company to have a risk plan associated with supply? And if so, then what does that look like? What are the components to consider when you create a risk plan for your supply chain? And let me start with you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's not only important to have a risk plan, but to exercise that plan. Everyone has a plan and everyone says the plan works until it's time to exercise it. So I think actively exercising that and challenging it and understanding some of the vulnerability and doing scenario play to understand how the different impacts. If you look at coming out of COVID, it wasn't just the manufacturing. Then it became transportation. And then it became, as more areas of the country, people were getting sick, resources to actually deliver against the demand. So I think it's important, obviously, any of us to have a risk plan, but then the regular exercising of that plan and updating of that plan and managing that plan and thinking about the different scenarios has become a greater reality coming out of COVID. And I expect that to continue. As I said earlier, I think a big part of that will be our maturation in digital capabilities, getting better analytics to really understand and be predictive modeling about how the different scenarios can impact our supply chain moving forward.
Tony, same question for you. Does Intel have a risk plan on supply chain, and what's included in that plan?
Well, we like to think we have a robust risk plan, and I think generally we do, but we certainly are learning and have learned a ton in this with this pandemic and the tariffs, et cetera. The piece that I would say, and I 100% agree with what Mike is raising around. You have to drill. You have to have the piece I would add maybe is in that drilling is the solid command and control where it's a combination of people know the roles. They know how to get things done, who to talk to. So there's a solid structure that enables fast decision making where it's necessary at the leader level. And when incidents happen, everybody knows where to go, and they know the communication paths and the structure that's going to happen. That should be just routine. That's one important part. And the second part that I would say is one of the things we've learned with this pandemic is we have to rely so heavily on the people on the ground making hour by hour decisions about how to move product, where to prioritize, what to go do in terms of where to position supply or what have you. And so having subject matter experts with the empowerment and the knowledge and capabilities, that analytics that you talked about, so important, right? So they can make real-time decisions. I think speed is of the essence in these situations. And it's one of the things I think it's taken us quite a bit of time. We still struggle from time to time where, decisions have to go up. We have to keep pushing them down. We have to make sure that, we set guidelines, but the people on the ground are really the ones, driving decision making and action for the company. And so it's a risk plan really put forward down into the levels of the organization.
Great. So you provide flexibility so that people on the ground that see what has to be done can take that kind of action.
Yeah.
Excellent. David, with regard to Cisco, tell us a little bit about your risk plan.
Yeah, so simple answer is yes, we have a risk plan. The real question is, did it work during this crisis? And parts did, part not. What we really look at, there was, I don't know, a bit ago, I read an article about McKinsey, an article that McKinsey wrote about the future proofing of the supply chain. And they looked at three elements. And I say we follow these three elements. One is resiliency. And we talked a lot about that earlier. But how do we address the changing environment we see every day, which we have now? And there's a lot of lessons we can learn from that. We talked a little about that ability. The second one is agility, the ability to rapidly meet customer demands and changing of demands. And we saw how we all talked about the struggles with that because we thought it was going one way and it went the other way. And then sustainability. So how supply chains are transitioning to clean and a socially just economy. And what we do in Cisco supply chain is we really have focused on those three elements and what we can and can't do. We talked a little bit about the global sourcing and making sure we have resiliency in our partners and where we do that. We've done the same thing with our supply base, and I talked a little bit about that. On agility, a lot of that has to be around our tool set, right? And can it help us make those decisions, because we're a very broad, complex supply chain, so individuals can't do that. We need that set of data. We need it correlated quickly. We need to think about how we get that data and what we need to make decisions. And then within that same thing, it's about the ability to spring back. So if something hit us and we weren't ready, how quick can we recover? So what's the recovery of us and our supply base to go do it? So now when we meet with suppliers, we ask them about that. If X happened, do you have a plan and what do you do? And then on the sustainability, I want to spend a few minutes on that. We absolutely have a commitment at Cisco to hit net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. And we're very, supply chain has a huge part of that because we're a big contributor to that, both hopefully getting there, but also the greenhouses itself based on the production and stuff we do around the world. We also follow circular design principles, so when equipment comes back, we can take that apart and be good for the environment. So we're really focusing on those activities, and that's what we look for when we put our risk plan together, those three elements, resiliency, agility, and sustainability. And we're getting our teams to start to think in that mindset so we're even more prepared for the next crisis. I just hope that next crisis is not soon. We have a 4, 5, 6 year break versus 2 hours. I see some laughters on the call, but we really need a little stability so we can actually work on these foundational, fundamental issues we got to work on would be helpful.
Yeah, I certainly hope that we don't have any immediate new surprise like that as well. For the audience, you can start preparing your questions. This is going to be my last question, so if you have questions, you can be making your way to the mic. So, staying with you, David, for a second, what is the biggest surprise or learning that you have out of this last 2.5 years?
Yeah, it always comes, what's inside Cisco, our sustainable differentiation as our innovations, the features and functions, the capabilities we bring to our customers. The supply chain within Cisco is an enabler. And one of the big surprises I had is what little a lot of the other leaders inside Cisco knew what supply chain was, because we always executed, we always got it down. So we went from being an unknown or an enabler, which is it's a great position to be in. It's something I chose in my career, versus being discussed at every board meeting, every executive level meeting, every company meeting, every sales event. I've been asked to spend more time speaking with customers, with sales leaders, with our company leaders, with other suppliers based on the crisis to explain what we do and how we're getting out of that. So that was one of my surprises. The other one, of course, is how the team really stepped up and started to execute, and how it was a level of, even though it was tough, it was long hours, they were excited, and the way they really just contributed to the results and the success of Cisco. So, it was both the visibility and just seeing the people just rally behind that. And it's always great to see of our team.
Excellent. It's always about the people, right? And then seeing them step up is awesome.
Can't do it without them.
Yes. Mike, what's the biggest surprise coming out of the last couple of years for you?
I'd say similar to David. I'm not sure if it's a surprise or a source of pride, but the resilience of the people on the factory lines, going through COVID, dealing with that personally, but their commitment to getting out the high quality products, especially around the vaccine. It was a tremendous effort, and I thought tremendous pride for globally for the culture of the company, and also the way the company responded to give people time off and recognize the effort that was being put in place. I thought the company really responded very well in managing even the encouraging employees around mental health because of all the stress that people were under. So I thought overall the company responded very well, but tremendous pride in the way the frontline workers delivered.
And we're so thankful for the vaccine, so appreciate what J&J did.
Yeah.
Tony, what's the biggest surprise for you?
Yes, thank you, Mike, as well for that. I have to say something similar. We're in year 2.5. Even before that, I think at Intel we were supply constrained, and the resilience of the people, the creativity that they bring day in and day out. The work to get product flowing. I think in the middle of the pandemic, with all of the challenges that people were having with family situations and work situations and government, and but that resilience, that commitment, the passion that people brought, the ideas to solve our customers' problems. To me, again, I don't know if it's a surprise. Similarly, I think it's just a source of great pride. I think Intel's responded as well to our employee base. I think we're growing and evolving, and it's great to see the leadership across the board just say, hey, how do we do this differently now? We're in a new environment. How do we grow and learn and listen to our employee base? But I have to say the greatest source of pride, and again, I don't know if it's a surprise, but it's the resilience, it's the creativity of our people to come back with real solutions, to take risk, to help improve the situation.
Excellent, thank you. The common themes, I think we've been hearing: resilience, innovation, continuity, the customer focus, agility, sustainability, and then just the diversification. So let me go ahead and open it up to the audience and see what questions you have for these esteemed panelists, supply chain experts. Yes, there's a question.
Hey, how you doing? Brandon Bravo. I work for Wells Fargo. I run Workforce Access Network, so anything not in the data center, it's my responsibility. I also finished a 20-year career at Citi where I ran global build and design for networks. So a huge fan of Cisco. And my question is around prioritization for David. How do you prioritize who gets what with a finite resource? Because I've had a lot of decommitments and had a lot of conversations with the supply chain heads at Cisco.
Yeah, well, I don't think we've met before, but really happy to follow up with you after. So how do we prioritize prioritization? When COVID first hit, as I mentioned, we prioritized by looking at governments, healthcare, the part of the industry that really needed the assistance. So we definitely had a process to prioritize what was going on. But then what happened is after we did that, and that's not a huge part of our demand, when we start to lose visibility to our supply coming in, we unfortunately had to go through a process of decommitting customer orders and resetting them. And it's bad enough we do that once. In some cases, we had to do it numerous times. It sounds like that's your experience. And we prioritize that based on, first we use first in, first out. We also then try to meet with critical customers about their prioritization so we can take their backlog and only give them the critical things. And unfortunately, it was a snowball effect because we would then reset that plan. We thought we had visibility of supply coming in, and that supply would be decommitted, maybe by even one of those gentlemen on this call. But we all ran into those similar issues, and so we had to keep on going through that process. And I know that was a difficult situation. We wish we didn't put our customers in there. One of the things we did do is we did extend lead time so we get a better handle on that and we can stop that. We've definitely improved over the last couple of quarters with that significantly. Hopefully you're starting to see that. And going forward, it will start to get better. But just the situation we're in, not a great answer because I know it's not a satisfaction, but we did it based on trying to identify, first in, first out, but more importantly, our critical customer needs.
I think we have another question in the room.
Sure. The question was asked earlier about outsourcing and how most of the large corporations in America have spent quite a bit of effort and money overseas, especially in Asia, to build these factories and grow to depend on their supply chain and whatnot. The question is, why not Latin America? And in the process, producing not only jobs that will keep people there and reduce the immigration issue that we have in America, but also reduce your greenhouse footprint, where you don't have to ship stuff over from China, and also deal with governments that are a little bit more friendly to the U.S. So I always have that question, why can't we just then, your companies build these factories and, you can name it, any country in Latin America, and produce the very same products that we're selling today?
Would someone like to take that question?
I can go ahead and start. We actually have a manufacturing presence in Costa Rica. We've had probably a 3 or 4 decade presence there, and it's probably 4. So we have development labs, we have engineering, we have site services, we have financial, and we have assembly test manufacturing. So we do produce product. Our server product comes through Costa Rica. So we do believe in a geographically dispersed factory network. And when we talk with our suppliers as well, we're looking for how can they also diversify or disperse their manufacturing presence.
Yeah, I would say the same, Tony.
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say the same for us as well. I think any global supply chain, I know there's a lot of emphasis on Asia, but like for us, big factories in Juarez, big factories I've been to in San Jose del Campos in Brazil and throughout Colombia. So I think we get a lot of the news around what's going on in Asia, but I would say every large global supply chain is global in nature, and certainly Latin America is a big part of that for us.
Yeah, and if I could just add, Latin America, specifically Mexico, is a huge manufacturing location for Cisco. It is also our fastest growing, and the one we've invested the most capital in the last few years. We have a significant size facility in Juarez and Guadalajara. I was just at Guadalajara on my way to Juarez. We did it just for the reason you talked about. When we start to look at landed cost, so when you take transportation and logistics into consideration of what you're trying to do and where you're trying to move, you see that those costs are very common, because you remove that and you get to your customer a lot faster, considering we build there for the customers in our North America and South America region. And then the other thing is the ability to attract and retain highly technical skills, both in our factory and our engineers to support that, has been significant in Mexico and has been improving over the last many years. And so it's a great asset for us and will continue to be.
Yeah, I think most companies are smart to look at Latin America, and not only the land, cost, and talent, but also the time zone. Very similar time zone to North America, so it makes it easier.
Yeah.
Oh, another question.
No, it's just, well, thank you for that, though. The right answer, I guess, but I would like to see that to be increased more. Again, from my simple perspective, again, why going so far, Asia, where they don't even like us here, and use this leverage Latin America?
Yeah, I think we got the answer to that. So it's great that there are investments in Latin America. Are there any other questions in the room or any questions online? Oh, it looks like there's a question online coming.
So, hey, with the evolution with automation and all the artificial intelligence, how the future for supply chain looks like? I mean, how are you going to preserve and protect people developing in that area, in the career point of view?
Okay. Would someone like to take that?
Yeah, I'll jump in first. I think it's not protecting people as much as developing people, right? And developing people with the future-ready skills are just so important for us globally. So I think as we look to automation, it's going to provide greater resiliency. It's going to provide greater quality in how we distribute our products, and we're going to be able to deliver more capacity. I think it's up to everybody to think in terms of what are we doing globally to provide the skill set and opportunity to train people in those skills. We often talk about, the way we're very manual and still in areas of the world today. We're going to be able to be with greater stability and sustainability through automation. So I think it's more of lifting the expectations and helping everyone get to a better skill set.
Anyone else want to chime in?
I would just say, I resonate with what Mike said. We should always be embracing technology and advancement of technology and automation and artificial intelligence and the access to data and the speed we get. You see what happens to world economies when they embrace that versus trying to push back at that and preserve the existing versus moving to the new. And it takes an education system. It takes a world governments that are focused on that and partnerships with both government and technology and companies to move that forward. So yes, there will be jobs in our production that we will automate one day. But for every one of those jobs, what I've seen over my time is they produce numerous more jobs, numerous more opportunities, gives people the ability to buy product they couldn't buy, access the internet they couldn't access, educate and learn. So I think organizations, companies, governments, local communities that embrace that, to me, get a much better outcome than trying to preserve that. And I know when you're an individual going through that and it's your career or your job, it's extremely difficult, and I feel for that. And what we need to do collectively is make sure we have that process to help them, assist them to get to that next opportunity, because more will exist in the future.
Excellent, thank you. We have another question in the room.
No, I don't have a question. I just wanted to say hi to David Ashley. That's all.
Hey, Guillermo, how you doing? Yeah, I wish I was in person.
Does anybody else want to say hi? All right, any other questions in the room or online? Okay, is there a question coming? Is that? She's making her way down here with a question, I think.
So our virtual audience is really engaged in this session, has a lot of questions, some of which you've already answered. But two in particular, a few of them wanted to understand the role in collaboration with other companies to address the common supply chain issue, and how long you foresee before we sort of get back to normal in terms of supply chain. Yes.
When do we get back to normal? That's the golden question.
I'm not sure I even know what normal means anymore.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd tell us, right? Yeah.
Sorry.
You know, I guess my read would be, I think when we think about, it will vary. You know, some areas will return to maybe a healthier supply-demand balance next year. I think in the semiconductor space, we'll see spots of that happen. Even this year, we're starting to see that. Transportation maybe takes well into 23, maybe even into early 24. So I think we still have, and of course, recessions will change the equation quite a bit. But I think we've got a good, 18 months or so of continued turbulence and disruption here from the pandemic.
David or Mike?
I'm not going to.
They're smarter and didn't want to put out a.
I'm not going to predict when we get back to normal. A lot of that has to do on the demand equation, and we see there's a lot of uncertainty in that demand around the world, consumers, governments, stuff. So we'll have to see how that plays out. We have, for many companies, you have an earnings season coming out, so that'll be a telltale. There was another part of that question that talked about, collaboration amongst other companies and stuff. There are great examples of consortiums, collaboration between companies trying to solve these issues, whether they're a set of companies and corporations in the United States that try to bring a certain pressure on our federal or state governments for certain regulations or certain capabilities. You heard Tony talk about the potential of building semiconductors in the United States, which is something that a set of companies are doing. They're doing it individually, but they're thinking about it together, and they're working with the government on that. I mean, I just think those are great examples of what goes on. And then there's the one-on-one relationships where we have excess of, someone doesn't, and we do abilities. So, and that's always good. And in the world we live in, a lot of our suppliers are also our customers, and a lot of our customers are also our suppliers. So you have that ecosystem that forms. It's not always, fun and exciting, but they do work a lot together, and that's been my experience.
I would say similar, David. I think there's a lot of co-creation happening. There's a lot of innovation happening, rising out of the challenges coming out of COVID and the recession and everything else. So I think you're going to see more of that moving forward, especially in the R&D space. So I think it's a very positive partnerships and stronger partnerships coming out of it. And as far as normal, I think we're going to be redefining normal. I think the world is going to be making adjustments, and we are making adjustments, but it's going to be a new normal for everybody.
Well, I certainly have learned a lot from this. I hope the audience has as well. I want to thank our three panelists, David, Mike, and Tony. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this concludes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.